Just a note to say that this is the first podcast I recorded after learning the news of the death of Anthony Fletcher Goldspink, a.k.a. Anthony Townsend, who you may remember was great fun on Happy Times and Places, celebrating with much elan the virtues of Timon the Rani. Anthony was a one-off, and although you can't tell, I think, from what I say in the forthcoming broadcast, I just wanted to note Anthony's passing and to rage against the dying of that incandescent light in the only way I know how, which is to watch and enjoy Doctor Who and try to be positive about it. But as I say, I just wanted to acknowledge Anthony in some small way. Oh, welcome to Happy Times and Places Under the Sea, as I, Toby Hadoke, try to watch an episode of Doctor Who and to celebrate its virtues whilst trying to guess my special guest's favourite things about the particular episode.
Hello, my name's Stephen Hatcher. I'm the coordinator of the Hoover's Doctor Who group based in Derby, and for the last 11 years I've been the organiser of the Hooverville convention. Over the years I've done a bit of writing as well. I wrote 5 stories for Big Finish Short Trips books. Toby, what I've got for you is the Sea Devils.
Well, hello everybody. It's time for another episode of Doctor Who, Part 3 of The Sea Devils. So, whether you have it on BritBox or on shiny DVD or even Blu-ray if you're listening in the future, it's not out on Blu-ray as I record this, please press play or select or whatever you would like to press in 3, 2, 1. There we go. Oh, that's quite loud, isn't it? Alexa, volume 4. That's still quite loud. Anyway, we'll get used to it, I'm sure. Or I can always shout at Alexa again. Alexa, volume 4. I'm sure that's too loud for volume 4. I think when I'm king, I'm going to make all the different channels just have the same kind of volume controls, and especially not that thing where it goes up when adverts are on. I mean, that is an act of, sort of cultural ear control that I think is egregious in the extreme. And Netflix does it on the trailers as well, where you've just finished watching a thing and then you just go, okay, I'll just stop now and have a quiet life. And then suddenly this thing blares at twice. I mean, it's designed to irritate you. I mean, why would a company whose service you pay for do something that is inconvenient to you just to hawk more of their wares? But it doesn't make me want to do it. Anyway, let's not get into that. Alexa, volume 3, while we're at it. So this is quite a long cut back to the sword fight, which has these slightly speeded up moments. So it's slightly comical. I wonder if I would forgive the new series if it did something, sort of with its tongue so firmly in its cheek. But Pertwee has such elegance and Delgado such charm that it's not like anyone's dicking about. So I have double standards. I will forgive this for some of its deliberate sillinesses. You saw Derek Ware's face there, but actually I wouldn't count that as a gaffe because he goes over quickly enough and he's got the beard and things going on. I think you have to be looking quite carefully to spot Derek Ware. So of course I've spotted where he is because I've looked very carefully, but I actually think it's very well done. That's a great cliffhanger. Quite a simple resolution. Trenchard comes in, the Doctor looks around, maybe it knocks the Master's aim, whatever. But doesn't matter. It's a really lovely. Michael Bryant's camera work in this is superb. I do like I am tickled by the whole moustache thing that the guards have. Now, one of the guards is Brian Gilmar, who's one of the sappers in Quatermass and the Pit, who credited part in Quatermass and the Pit and a reasonable role, but ended up doing sort of, uncredited walk-ons extra work, and died in the early 2000s. And I had the Equity brochure that had his brochure, the death brochure. No, Equity do a quarterly magazine which always lists, when people have died. And it was certainly early 2000s, but I didn't keep those things in those days. Odd, because I've kept some right tat over the years. So I've never quite got an exact date for him. But then again, Equity sometimes lists somebody. They go, news has reached us that so-and-so has died. And you go, yeah, that person died 25 years ago, but news has only just reached Equity. So they listed George Cormack, who plays Campo, relatively recently, in the past couple of years. I think he died about 20 years ago. So, you still sort of expect to Charlie Chaplin. And yeah, anyway. So yes, a glazed expression and a moustache is the order for the day if you want to be one of the guards in Trenchard's prison. So here we get to see what his, that he's up to no good, having just been this sort of buffer. We knew that he was clued, he was in cahoots with the master, but now the Doctor is onto it as well. But because he knows. There's a suggestion, isn't there, that the Master's exerting a little bit of mental control. And I suppose it's left up to us, how much do we think, this is wishful thinking on Trenchard's part because he's been kind of pensioned off to governor duties, having, whereas, in his head he's a man of the empire, and his empire is a castle with one prisoner in it. And I suppose we're left to work out for ourselves, how much he's being duped by anything other than, the Master's guile, rather than anything sort of metaphysical. So, yeah, the music. I wonder if Steve will choose the music. I don't actually remember this particular sequence from the suite. It's called a suite. That's an excellent shot of the Master's eyes through the looking glass. There, you get quite a few. You get the directors trying to do a lot of quite interesting things in the 70s. I used to think of the Pertwee year as all being very similar, but actually the different directors bring very good different visual styles. Now this is of course the episode that where we jump aboard the submarine, so there's lots to tell you there, because just like Steve Hatcher brings his naval knowledge to this, one of the patrons of these podcasts, and a gentleman with whom I correspond every now and again, Russell McPhillips, has written for Doctor Who magazine a few times, and he's a gentleman of military knowledge, and he did loads of research into the submarine, and the fallout of what happened with the submarine, which, for those who don't know, there was always this sort of story that the BBC got into a bit of trouble because of the propeller used on the model submarine. I'd thought they'd bought a submarine from the shop and then just augmented it with a couple of propellers, but Ross's digging seems to suggest it was a sort of mixture of a built model and stuff that they'd bought. Anyway, this is Donald Sumpter, looking very handsome with his beard and a full head of hair. He has previously been Enrico Casali in The Wheel in Space, and was for a while one of those actors who went on to have a stellar career. He was in Titus Andronicus at the Royal Shakespeare Company with Brian Cox in that production that was sort of made Brian Cox. Brian Cox was a well-respected actor prior to there, but it was a huge, I think Deborah Warner directed it, huge breakout production. And then Sumpter, who'd done some movies as well in the 70s. He played the Black Panther, I think, and bits and bobs of telly. But he was a character actor who gradually sort of ascended up the ranks and is now, I think, one of our sort of bona fide sort of leading character actors, if you like. but now, you know, he's stayed sort of. He has very sort of cadaverous features, but he's now lost his hair, so he has a sort of bald dome, and he got very nice billing in Game of Thrones, which is full of illustrious actors. But those credited at the end were all sort of in a big list of sort of 5 or 6. But he got a single credit, which you know, shows some good negotiating on the behalf of his agent, and that he has a certain stature himself. Now, a lot of very illustrious actors didn't get that at the end of Game of Thrones, and of course he returned to play Rassilon opposite Peter Capaldi, and really nice to see him back. Oh, and he was in the Sarah Jane Adventures as well. So I love Donald Sumpter. I think he's a terrific actor. He's a regular with you know, he's got a regular position in a football crowd. I think you have a seat, don't you, if you're a season ticket holder in a football crowd. I won't give away the team, but a friend of mine sits a few doors down, as it were, and Donald Sumpter is interviewed on the DVD documentary for the Sea Devils, and seems really chuffed to have been in Doctor Who, which I love, that an actor of his stature is chuffed to have been in Doctor Who. And anyway, my friend asked him if he'd do my podcast, and he very politely just said, I don't really do interviews and stuff like that anymore, which is a shame, because he'd definitely be very high on my list of people that I would very, very much like to interview. I almost got the opportunity to act with him. He played a semi-regular, a recurring part in Holby City as the father of one of the regular characters, and one of her exit storylines sort of coincided. Her near exit storyline coincided with when I was in a Christmas episode of Holby City, and I got very excited because I looked to see that character who was in the script I was going to be in had previously been in it, played by Donald Sumpter. So I was really excited. But he obviously wasn't available, and there was an actor who'd never been in Doctor Who I was nonetheless excited to work with, because he's a fine actor, Ken Bones, who of course has since been in Doctor Who in quite an important part, playing the General in a couple of episodes, including some very important ones. So I preempted. And I'd seen Ken Bones on stage. He's a fine actor. Talking of fine actors, here's David Griffin, who replaced pretty much Simon Cadell in Hi-de-Hi, and is a bit of a sitcom star in the UK. Another one who is not for interviews. So this is a submarine of people who are not especially interested in being interviewed for Doctor Who. He lives in Portugal now, I think, David Griffin. But I remember being quite surprised that he was in the Sea Devils, because I knew him as an actor, and I thought, I not thought of him as somebody who'd been in Doctor Who. It was only when I was casually perusing a cast list that it was one of those ones where suddenly everything came together, and I went, oh no, he has, oh good. And this is Stanley McGee, who is also a mustachioed guard in Colony in Space. So he obviously gives good guard, and he lives in Australia now. I don't know if anyone's ever tried to interview him. Come on, Australia, get him to a convention. So sorry, it's quite actor heavy. So I'll get onto the submarine. So what happened with? Well, we'll see the submarine in a bit, because there's footage from. I remember when I first talked to sort of older Doctor Who fans about this story. There was a few that were like, well, it's just like an advertisement for the Royal Navy, and it's not really. They use lots of good shots of boats and things, and some stock footage, but a lot of it specially shot using equipment. That's great. It gives it a whole flavour all of its own, and puts money on the screen, which Doctor Who can so rarely get to do. It's typical Doctor Who fan, that though, isn't it? They go, we know that the Navy helped make this, because they get a caption slide, and so we're hardwired to almost go, so that is the thing we will criticise it for. Whereas actually it really augments it nicely. That's a great shot. Goes to show how big this building is. In fact, a friend of mine went to this building very, very recently, or is going. I can't remember. I've got so many friends who tell me that they're going to have on some sort of Doctor Who location visit. But I remember thinking it was apt, because I was in the middle of watching this story. Yeah, I quite like that the music sort of tied in with Joe appearing at the window there. I love the way Katie Manning does that. You give some chat, and I'll come and overpower the guard. I like her little mime for chat there. That's very funny. Blink blonk blink blong. Wow wow wow. How do we feel about? Do send in correspondence how we feel about the music. I think it works much better in the story than it did as a record, and I'm slightly embarrassed by the amount of hours I spent playing this on the turntable in an attempt to try and think I was entertaining myself, because I wasn't. I thought it sounded horrible. And I mean, I've been walking in the park recently, listening to Murray Gold's music and thoroughly enjoying it because it's good music, but it also is quite exciting. And there's some, like all the strange creatures and some of them, bum, 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 that is quite, I walk around feeling quite heroic when I listen to that, and I don't care who admits it. I think music can be very evocative. Sometimes I listen to the Hamilton soundtrack and I sing along to that in my head. Sometimes I even listen to Eminem occasionally and think these chicks don't know the name of my band, and it makes me feel quite powerful. And sometimes I listen to 80s things, bands that we sort of thought were a bit naff at the time that I'm now really nostalgically drawn to. But I don't really feel the need to whack on Doctor Who the music, which I have on vinyl upstairs, but I think I can probably get the Sea Devil Suite. Is it on the 50th anniversary thing? I've got that as well. But I don't feel the need to get jiggy, and there is some with the Sea Devils, Funkorama, and there is some, I think, Doctor Who incidental music that I think is listenable toable for pleasure. Although I'm slightly embarrassed I'm admitting that out loud. Why? It's music. Yes, it's designed for a television program. I don't care if I listen to it and enjoy listening to it. I don't have to explain myself to anybody. But yeah. But of course, for Malcolm Clarke's defence, he was not composing it to be listened to all in one go whilst you're walking around the park or in your teenage bedroom trying to think of other things to do when there's no such thing as home video and repeats and all of that sort of thing. It's supposed to be a dramatic counterpoint or accompaniment to the outlandish machinations of the master and the sort of avant-garde adventures of Doctor Who and the Sea Devils. I think it gives, just like the location filming and particularly the naval stuff gives this its own flavour. I love the fact that Doctor Who in these days could go off piste a little bit. In that I've said this before, that Doctor Who doesn't necessarily travel through time and space. He travels from genre to genre. Now, I do think of the Pertwee era sometimes as quite samey, and yet there's a different visual and audio flavour to Day of the Daleks as there is to Curse of Peladon as there is to this. This Curse of Peladon's all in the studio. This has a bit of location. And the boats. Curse of Peladon has all those different monsters. This has, underwatery stuff. Curse of Peladon has Dudley Simpson music. This has Malcolm Clarke. Day of the Daleks has some really interesting and experimental visuals from Paul Bernard, cutting from, in the vision mixing and the depth of field in and the way that the sets are constructed to go right back to the back of the studio. This is Christopher Wray, who is, I think, the only person who's ever been in Doctor Who to have a shop named after them. That could be wrong. But I used to walk past Christopher Wray lighting on Deansgate in Manchester, and he had one in London as well. So there's the submarines. There's a lot to talk about here. Hang on though, because I love that. That's a bit reminiscent of the beginning of the novel. And I'm a sucker for somebody down a radio line calling in something scary, and then you hearing them perish at the other end. I think that's terribly dramatic, and I like it very much. It's a trope, but there's all sorts of, it means you can't help the person. You're helpless as you hear them struggling. You can't see them, so you imagine the terrible things that are happening. Because you can hear their voice, you sort of get their personality a little bit. It works into and the camera is on the person that cannot do anything, which emphasizes the helplessness. I love all of that, and it did a nice little blur as well to get us out of that situation. So I always like somebody stricken down the line. But yeah, Christopher Ray on the headphones. He's back next week. He's also Constable Groom in The Demons. There's a few actors like Christopher who don't always return for the same director. But who come on in a few small parts in the Pertwee era. It's like, so you can understand it if they come back for the same director, but there's like a little sort of bevy of little character players who come back for 2 or 3 times for different directors. And Christopher Ray, I spoke to him on the phone. He was one of the ones that got away. He'd never been in any of the sort of Oldbourne reunions or anything like that, so I'd assumed he wasn't really that bothered. But maybe it's because so many were that people sort of thought, oh well, we don't need to bother with the guy who played the small part of the policeman because he's only in a couple of scenes on film. So I wrote to him, got a lovely letter back saying how he loved his time as an actor, and I thought he'd be Johnny Big Bollocks because he'd got shops. Around this time he was sort of buying up sort of bits of bric-a-brac and then selling them, I think, on a stall. Doing up sort of antique lamps and things like that, and then selling them at a profit. And eventually he had his own shop in London, and then his own shop in Manchester as well, Christopher Ray Illuminations or whatever, and was a very successful, proprietor of a very successful boutique sort of lighting place, Christopher Ray shop. And I phoned him, and he said, "Oh yeah, I'm just about to do a deal at the moment," and he was having his supper. So I said, "Oh, I'll phone you in a month." But because the first phone call hadn't gone, and he was fine, he was lovely. He wasn't annoyed I'd called or anything like that. But it takes me so much. It makes me feel physically sick phoning people up. So the fact that I would then have to do it again, having called at the wrong time the first time, I never did. And then a year or so later he died. He was on my list of people to follow up. See, that's what helps when I was drunk, you see, because I'd have a couple of drinks and then I'd pluck up the courage. I find phoning people really intimidating. So I'm in the wrong line of work. It's not. It's my hobby. So yes, here we are. I love it. Oh, and the best bit ever. I love Donald Sumpter's wobbly eye acting. He shows that he's got this slight sort of twitch when he gets nervous. And so when we get this close up, he just does a little thing with his eye where he shows that it's just a nice little touch. It's not too much, that shows that he's, when he's under pressure or when he's thinking about something, his eye just does a little sort of squinty thing. And I think it's just one of those tiny little moments that really helps that shot, that really helps sell the drama of that, which is already cool because it's somebody dying down the end of a radio, and you've heard what I like about that. Hello, Terry Walsh with a blonde moustache. But I just think that little character touch from the actor, a top-notch actor, a brilliant actor, as has been proved, who, rather encouragingly for all of us, didn't start at the top. He was playing decent parts, but very much doing sort of, decent, good character work, but being jolly good in a... you wouldn't have... If you said who's going to be one of our leading actors in 2022... would you have said, if you'd looked at the sort of status of the parts, would you have said Enrico Casali from The Wheel in Space and Commander Ridgway from The Sea Devils, neither of which are leading parts in the Doctor Who stories that they're in? But, persevering, chipping away, doing good work, and, he is now a hugely, hugely regarded actor. And has been for many years, and has done movies, and again, single caption credit, featured part, always working. That's the life. Well done, Donald Sumpter. I really like Donald Sumpter. I wish he'd let me interview him, but I will not hold the fact that he doesn't want to be interviewed against him, because he is a fine, fine actor. I love this shot of Trenchard and the Master, because is there a photograph of that? It's just a very recognisable Doctor Who image, and in fact, there's quite a lot from this sequence that's recognisable. And this is great, and Joe and the Doctor by the cliffs, and we're going to get the Sea Devil rising from the sea, aren't we? And just the handy minefield. But of course, because they had the clip of that on, I think, the Resistance is Useless documentary. They had the clip from next week. So this is quite a famous Doctor Who sequence. But of course, it's just the one Sea Devil. I think that's a great shot, though. And isn't that a brilliant design? I love that design of the Sea Devil. And it's just such a great image of it rising from the sea. Nice close-up, nice on film. That's a very simple sequence. It's just the Doctor looking, isn't it? Just Doctor looking, the guards pointing, Master and Trenchard on the cliff. One actor in a Sea Devil costume rising from the sea. But it all makes for, once again, a fantastic cliffhanger. A reminder to self, cliffhangers might be my bonus thing. Commander Ridgway, Donald Sumpter. Christopher Wray, bless him. So yeah, he had a shop. I do have his questionnaire somewhere, though. I've never published it anywhere. Of him recording his time with Doctor. And the one thing I remember from it is saying, I loved my time as an actor. And he said, yeah, if you want any more, call me on this number. So there's a lesson is if you think, that person's never cropped up in documentaries or done interviews or done conventions, they're probably not interested. It might just be that they haven't been asked. I assumed because he was, the guy with the shops, he also might not be interested, but he was perfectly interested. But I chickened out. So I've got a lovely letter from him, but I never got to interview him in person. And I think he'd have had a really interesting story to tell. So that's another one that got away. So that was episode 3 of The Sea Devils, and I know what my favourite thing is going to be. It's going to be Donald Sumpter's twitchy eye, because I love it. It's just a tiny acting detail. So it's not a performance. It's, his performance is great. But it's that tiny detail and the way that it's used in that scene where he hears the person dying at the other end, which is, as I say, reminiscent of the opening chapter of The Sea Devils, which is so arresting when the SS Pevensey Castle goes down and we see the Sea Devils in action, sinking ships, which we don't actually see in the story at all. That all has to be left to our imagination. And there's something so grim about that, because if you're in a boat and there's a hole in the bottom of it, and you're at sea, you're in trouble, especially as if you're trying to escape in the lifeboats, that then they get burnt holes in bottom. I remember finding that, and I think because I'd read stuff about Titanic and things like that, there is something pretty sickening about being, surrounded, water. If you haven't got anything to, be in when you're on it, water is death and cold and inky blackness and the unknown, and it's scary. And my goodness, I find submarines really scary. I mean, this one, the lighting is quite bright. You don't get that feel. There was a series recently with Saran Jones said, murder mystery set on a submarine. I thought that was an excellent setting because you can't get off and you're underwater. And if you want to get out of the building you're in, as it were, you're underwater and in trouble. And I think a submarine is a great, atmospheric and claustrophobic setting. You're confined in this space. And I've been in my dad lived in Germany, and I went to visit him only a couple of times, but he took us around they had a U-boat that you could go around, and it was so tiny and cramped, and you banged your elbows on everything. And just imagine being in there and underwater and confined and of course, if then anything happened, you got hit or attacked or whatever, you're just done for. Oh God, I find that. Now that's not particularly apparent in the depiction of the submarine here. So I think Cold Blood tries to do that with its setting, but I think there's still a place probably for a really spooky, horrible, almost too unbearable submarine setting to Doctor Who story. But what that does effectively is it has the something going on at the other end of the vessel, and you can just hear it, and that's taking advantage of Doctor Who's limitations and still doing it effectively, but in a different way from how you'd ideally do it, which is to show loads of sea devils storming about the place, killing people in exciting ways. Can't do that, so it did that instead. And as a result, Donald Sumpter went, well, if I do this wobbly thing with my eye, that might show that I'm having to keep it together, but I am a bit unnerved. Lovely little, because he does it in one of the earlier scenes when we first see you. He's just got a slight little twitch. Donald Sumpter's wobbly eye. Now that's the name. I want there to be a horse. For any racehorse owners out there, I want you to christen your racehorse Donald Sumpter's wobbly eye. So now I have to find what the lovely Steve Hatcher has chosen as his favourite thing of episode 3 of The Sea Devils. So let's find out.
Episode 3, I've picked on the Doctor and the Master's sword fight. There's a definite dash of Errol Flynn and Basil Rathbone here. Now, Delgado, of course, has done this sort of thing many, many times before. He had the fortune to have that look. He was half Spanish, and he had that look that made him look swarthy and sinister, as might have been said in another age. He played the Spanish ambassador in the Adventures of Sir Francis Drake, the ITC Adventure series, and many a sword fight in that. And here we go. He resurrects those skills here. Pertwee, with lots of ha, hi, and all the rest of it, holds his own with him, and does a good job. In fact, the Doctor seems to have the Master beaten at one point, but then inexplicably, for whatever reason, returns his sword to him. It's as if he's enjoying the sport so much he forgets that this fight actually really does matter. So the Master and the Doctor's sword fight from episode 3.
Well, I mean, I think I could have you on a technicality there, Steve, and say it's from episode 2 and it's the reprise of episode 3. But there's nothing in the rules to say you can't have that. So, and it is a great sword fight. It is, but I think there's something about that gesture, isn't it? I've won, but I will give him the sword back. I wonder how many people died from that sort of following that sort of etiquette of going, well, I have disarmed him, but I would, this needs to be a fair fight, so I'll give you your sword back. Well, it's not how you win fights terribly, but yes, but I need to be seen to do it the proper way, and that's always that. The tug of war between doing the correct thing and not being daft, but I in the safety of a Doctor Who adventure, the fact that we know that Doctor Who's not going to die means that seeing him do the honourable thing shows what a jolly good chap he is, and none of those things really are terribly logical. The eating of the sandwich, the giving the sword back, the sort of light-hearted banter, because sword fights are hard and dangerous and cut you and kill you and all sorts of things, but it just works because it's a charming program with 2 charming protagonists. It's a zesty, fun adventure. Young people of today, take note. It's a zesty, fun adventure. Where we sort of laugh at danger in a way, because that's what good humour does as well. It takes the terrible things in the world and undercuts them with humour and with zest, which of course but it has to be contained within realism, and that works in this because nobody's sending it up, because the actors are effortless and charming, and because everybody is doing their best in the other areas, like the military stuff and the monster design and all that sort of stuff, which then contains those moments of charm and makes them work. I think it's just so wonderfully judged. But it may just be that's because I'm predisposed to like it because it's a classic from days of yore before I was born, and everything before I was born was better, so I was predisposed to it. But was I don't know. Because I went through a phase of being a bit underwhelmed, as I've discussed a lot in this podcast, from what the Target books led me to expect of a story and what they were actually like. But I am loving the Sea Devils. I think I struggled for about the first 5 minutes of today's podcast, because I think just to get back into rhythm. But I think I did. I think I finally got there, and we talked about some interesting things. So did the story maybe tread water a little bit at the beginning? Well, it was a long reprise, wasn't it? But actually, that was Steve's favourite bit. So what do I know? Anyway, that was the end of episode 3 of The Sea Devils. Thanks to Ross and McPhillips. I'll talk more about the submarine in the next episode. But I would direct you to his articles in Doctor Who magazine. He's somebody with a specialism, and he started writing about the Doctor Who production team's real life correspondence or reactions from or liaisings with the military or the Navy, the armed forces. And it's yielded some really interesting results. And the article that he did about the submarine, it's got a quote from Rupert Allison, who's the I think he's an ex-MP now and spy writer. And I always love it when somebody who's sort of excelled in a field somewhere else is quoted in Doctor Who magazine, giving an opinion on some little arcane detail of Doctor Who, because that's where their expertise comes in. I love all of that. It was like when Roy Hattersley's on the DVD of documentary of on Doctor Who and the Silurians. I love that somebody thought to go, why don't we interview Roy Hattersley? And I went to Roy Hattersley getting a letter going, they want me to talk on a Doctor Who DVD? How marvellous. I love that. And it just goes to show, not just looking at Doctor Who through a very narrow and limited prism, but opening it out and expanding our experiences. It's great, great to hear beyond that. I love that. Anyway, so I'm thrilled by all aspects of the Sea Devils, and even some aspects that are nothing to do with the Sea Devils. Well done, Doctor Who. Well done, the Sea Devils. Boo, Steve, because you chose something that originated last week, but that's allowed. I'm still going. I'm still happy I chose Donald Sumpter's Wobbly Eye. So with that in mind, I'm going to scream down the line to you now, helplessly, and say that it's the end of episode 3, and happy times and places to you all. Ta-ta! Thanks ever so much for listening to Happy Times and Places, which is presented by me, Toby Hadoke, with a twitchy eye, and my special guest, Steve Hatcher, who is on Twitter at StephenPH_Hatcher. I would like to thank him and the various patrons who make these podcasts possible, and they include Joel Aarons, Mark Aldridge, Kit Allen, Sebastian April, Tilt Oriza, Simon Ash, Richard Alt, Stephen Bamford, Richard Bignell, Peter Blackett, Robin Bland, Kyle Bors, David Brody, Nigel Bromley, Hugh Buchtman, Tim Burrows, Anthony Carroll, Phil Chapman, Ralph Chilton, Susan Christian, Steve Churchill, Mark Clues, Graham Cluley, Charles Coffin, Simon Coling, Paul Colnaghy, Ben Cook, Martin Cook, Matt Corner, Paul Cornell, Leslie Coots, Ben Cowdell, Peter Crocker, Philip Craggs, Lee Clemin, Dave Curran, Simon Curtis, and Paul Philip Dahlgren. The music is by Dave Gates, the artwork by Dylan Patterson. Oh, I nearly ran out of breath there. So thanks to those patrons who make these podcasts possible and ensure that they are ad-free. Isn't it nice not to be interrupted by me stopping going, hang on, I need to stop talking about submarines. Do you like shaving? I've got a manly shaving thing here, and you get 10% off if you type in Toby Shaves when you get, none of that. So please go to patreon.com/Toby Hadoke, and you can save me from shaving for money. And it's a monthly commitment from as little as £3 a month, and you get 10% off. Even that, if you sign up for a year in one go. That does tie you up to a year, but you'll have forgotten you've paid it. There are various tiers. I don't mean because you start crying, because you hear my voice too often. There are tiers of sort of rewards for a sort of higher feed subscription, but actually you get most things at the lowest tier, because I just can't withhold things. There are a couple of little goodies, but they go right up to £1 million if you want to pay that. Nobody has yet, for some surprising reason. But look, if you can't commit to a monthly thing, and I totally understand that, there's also the Ko-fi option, which is kofi.com/Toby Hadoke, where you can just chuck me a few pennies should you ever feel inclined to do so. Oh, I'd love it if you could spread the word about these, especially if you live in the United States of America or Canada or Australia, where I have a small pocket of loyal listeners, but I always feel I could do slightly better there, because I sound like those people in those countries expect English people to sound, and I think I need to capitalise upon that. I'm in a slightly odd situation because I recorded the bulk of this, obviously the watching of the episode, before we found out who the new Doctor Who is. If you're a non-patron, by the way, this is old news, but patrons get these things almost, when hot off the press, whereas one of the disadvantages of not being a patron is that certainly Happy Times and Places always 6 months behind. So, I mean, we may have a 15th Doctor by now. I'm sure we haven't. So, anyway, yeah, this is the first piece of sort of topping and tailing that I've recorded since finding out who the new Doctor Who is. So welcome, Shuti Gatwa. And the next episode, episode 4, I recorded when I had found out who the new Doctor is. So that's just to place us in the timeline and chronology of the development and history of Doctor Who. I wonder if this may even go out to non-patrons after the centenary special. So this is what you're missing out on. And if you've decided to listen this far, right to the bitter end of the podcast, think of all the unnecessary material you could be claiming for as little as £3 a month. I'll stop. I sound like a hustler. I'm terrible at it. I'm just glad you're listening. I really am. So this is a bit where I sort of say something. Well, I have said something trivial and unrelated, but I haven't said rate these 5 stars on iTunes. So please do that. It costs you nothing. All right. I feel dirty now. I'm going to have a shower. A metaphorical one. I had a perfectly proper shower this morning, so I don't actually need a cleansing shower, but I do need a metaphorical shower, which I shall hop into now. Can you hear that piano, by the way? It still bothers me, that next door in his piano. It's very loud from where I'm sitting. As I say, you probably can't hear a thing.